The massive chamber doors slid open with a hiss that echoed through the cold metal corridor. Katie Brooks felt rough hands shoving her forward, and she stumbled into the bright lights beyond. The electromagnetic cuffs around her wrists buzzed against her skin, sending tiny vibrations up her arms. She blinked hard, trying to adjust her eyes to the harsh glare. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Just 3 months ago, Katie had been celebrating her acceptance into the diplomatic corps. At 19, she was the youngest intern Earth had ever sent into deep space. Her parents had been so proud. Her little brother had called her an astronaut, even though she tried to explain that diplomats and astronauts were different things. She'd laughed then. God, that felt like a lifetime ago now. The tribunal chamber stretched out before her like something from a nightmare. 12 platforms rose in a semicircle, each one holding a different alien species. Some looked almost familiar, with 2 arms and 2 legs. Others were so strange that Katie's brain struggled to make sense of what she was seeing. One appeared to be made of living crystal. Another floated in a tank of purple liquid. But her eyes kept returning to the center platform where the lead counselor sat. The creature was massive, easily twice her height even while seated. Its body was covered in dark green scales that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns. The head was long and narrow like an alligator's, but the eyes were different. They were intelligent, calculating, and completely cold. When it looked at her, Katie felt like a mouse being studied by a snake. "Human," the creature said, and its voice came through a translator device that turned the hissing, clicking sounds into flat, emotionless words. But Katie could hear the disgust underneath. The way it said "human" made it sound like a curse word. Katie's throat felt dry, but she forced herself to stand up straight. Her diplomatic training kicked in, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. "I am Katie Brooks, official representative of Earth's United Nations. I'm here to address the territorial dispute in the Kepler sector." The lead counselor's scales rippled, a movement that might have been amusement. "You stand accused of territorial violations and espionage against the Council's protected zones. These are serious crimes." "That's not true," Katie said, and she was proud that her voice didn't shake. "We submitted all the proper paperwork for our expansion into the Kepler sector. Your office approved our request 3 months ago. I have the documents." "We do not care about your documents," another counselor interrupted. This one looked insect-like, with multiple legs and eyes that glittered like black diamonds. "Your species has existed in our galaxy for barely a decade. You are children playing with technology you do not understand." The reptilian leader leaned forward, and Katie could see rows and rows of serrated teeth behind its lips. "Your species presumes too much. You think because you have learned to travel between stars that you are our equals? You are not. You are newcomers, primitives who crawled from a backwater world. You will confess to your crimes or you will face the consequences." Katie felt anger rising in her chest, pushing back against the fear. "I have nothing to confess to. Earth has followed every single protocol in the Council's guidelines. We've been careful, respectful, and patient. We've done everything right." "Silence." The counselor's claw slammed down on the panel in front of it, and the sound boomed through the chamber like thunder. Katie flinched despite herself. "Your arrogance proves your guilt. Take her to the compliance chambers. Perhaps pain will teach your species the humility they lack." 2 guards appeared from behind her. They were another species entirely, thick and muscular, with skin like gray stone. They grabbed Katie's arms with crushing grip, and she gasped at the strength of them. She tried to pull away, tried to plant her feet, but it was like fighting against steel cables. "Wait, you can't do this," Katie shouted as they dragged her toward a side door. "I have diplomatic immunity. This violates every treaty Earth has signed with the Council." The reptilian leader watched her struggle with those cold, ancient eyes. "Your species will learn their place. This is not negotiable." As the guards pulled her across the smooth floor, Katie felt something on her uniform jacket vibrate. The emergency beacon. The tiny device that every Earth diplomat carried just in case. It was transmitting now, sending her location and vital signs back home. A thin thread of hope sparked in her chest. But the lead counselor noticed the small red light pulsing on her collar. Katie waited for the order to disable it, to crush her last connection to Earth. Instead, the creature smiled, showing every single one of those terrible teeth. "Let it transmit," it said, its voice dripping with amusement. "Let them know what happens to those who defy the Council. Your homeworld is 30 light-years away. By the time any help arrives, there will be nothing left to save. Let this be a lesson to humanity about knowing their place." The door slid open in front of her, revealing a dark corridor that seemed to swallow the light. The guards threw her forward and Katie stumbled into the darkness. Behind her, the door sealed shut with a sound that reminded her of a coffin lid closing. She was alone now, and the only light came from the small red pulse of her beacon, beating like a heart in the darkness. The compliance chamber was smaller than Katie expected. Cold metal walls, no windows, just harsh white lights that burned her eyes. They strapped her into a chair that adjusted itself to her body, metal bands locking around her wrists, ankles, and forehead. She couldn't move more than an inch in any direction. The Inquisitor entered the room. It was a different species from the council leader, shorter but no less terrifying. Its skin was pale blue and seemed to shimmer like oil on water. Multiple thin arms extended from its torso, each one ending in delicate fingers that looked almost surgical in their precision. "We will begin now," it said, its voice soft and almost gentle. That somehow made it worse. The machine beside Katie's chair hummed to life. She didn't know what it was called, didn't understand the alien technology, but when it activated, her entire world became pain. It felt like every nerve in her body was being set on fire simultaneously. Her muscles locked up, her jaw clenched so hard she thought her teeth would shatter. The scream built in her throat, but she choked it down, refusing to give them the satisfaction. Her vision went white at the edges, and for a moment she thought she might pass out. But the pain kept her conscious, kept her trapped in the moment. The Inquisitor watched her with those strange, colorless eyes. "Interesting," it said, tilting its head like a scientist observing an experiment. "Most species submit within moments. They beg, they plead, they confess to anything we ask. But your physiology is more resilient than we expected." Katie's fingers curled into fists, her nails digging into her palms hard enough to draw blood. She focused on that smaller pain, used it as an anchor. Somewhere in the back of her mind, past the agony, a single thought formed: hold on. Someone's coming. They have to be coming. They wouldn't just leave her here. The Inquisitor made a small gesture with one of its many hands. The machine's whine increased in pitch. The pain doubled. 30 light-years away, at the exact moment the neural disruptor first activated, alarms began screaming through Earth's United Nations Space Command Center. Admiral Tom Hayes was in the middle of a boring budget meeting when his aide, Lieutenant Cooper, burst through the conference room door without even knocking. The young man's face was sheet white, and his hands were shaking. "Sir, we've received a priority alpha distress signal from Katie Brooks. She's on Kepler Prime Station." Cooper's voice cracked. "Sir, they're torturing her. We're receiving her vital signs in real time through her beacon." The room went silent. Hayes was on his feet before anyone else could react, already moving toward the door. "Show me." The command center was organized chaos. Every screen showed different data, but Hayes's eyes went straight to the main display. There it was, a live biometric feed from Katie's emergency beacon. Her heart rate was spiking wildly, jumping from 100 to 180 beats per minute. The pain receptor readings were off the charts, showing levels that should have knocked her unconscious. But the consciousness indicator showed she was still awake, still aware, still feeling every single second of it. Hayes felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd been in the military for 30 years, had seen combat, had lost friends. But watching a 19-year-old girl being tortured in real time while he stood 30 light-years away was something else entirely. Distance to Kepler Prime? His voice came out flat, emotionless. It was the voice he used when he was holding back rage. 30 light-years, sir, the tactical officer reported. Standard faster-than-light travel would take us 3 weeks minimum, even if we left right now. Hayes watched the readings spike again. Katie's heart rate hit 200. "Prep the fleet. Full combat loadout. Every ship we have that can fight. And someone get me Commander Beth Williams from the Experimental Drive Division. Right now." "Sir, the experimental drives aren't rated for." "Get her. Now." 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. Hayes stood in front of the tactical display, watching Katie's vitals fluctuate. Every spike in pain receptors felt like a punch to his gut. The command center had gone quiet. Everyone was watching, everyone was waiting. Commander Williams arrived at a run, still pulling on her uniform jacket. She was the head of humanity's most ambitious project, the Alcubierre Mark 7, a drive system that could compress spacetime in ways that shouldn't be physically possible. "Admiral," she said, slightly out of breath. "I heard. How bad is it?" Hayes gestured to the screen. Williams looked, and he watched the color drain from her face. "Oh God. That's Katie Brooks. I know her family. Her mom works in engineering. Can you get us there?" Hayes asked quietly. Williams turned to look at him, and he saw her doing the calculations in her head. If we push the Mark 7 to maximum compression, bypass every safety protocol we have. Yes. Approximately 32 minutes. But Admiral, the risk is enormous. We've only tested this once, and that was in a controlled environment. At maximum compression, there's a real chance the drive could tear the ships apart. I'd estimate a 60% survival probability. Maybe less. Hayes looked back at the screen. Katie's heart rate was becoming erratic, jumping between extremes. And if we don't go? If we do this the safe way? Williams followed his gaze. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. She has maybe 15 minutes left. 20 if she's incredibly lucky. The command center was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Hayes stared at the numbers, at the girl who was suffering because she'd believed in diplomacy and peace. He thought about her family, about her mother working in engineering. He thought about every soldier he'd ever commanded, every promise he'd made about never leaving people behind. Then we don't have a choice, he said, and his voice carried through the entire command center. All hands to battle stations. Get every ship ready for immediate departure. Tell the engineering crews to push those drives past every red line they have. Safety protocols are suspended. We're going to get our girl back, or we're going to die trying. The command center exploded into motion. Within minutes, 15 warships were powering up, their crews racing to battle stations. The occupier drives began charging, pulling power from every system that wasn't essential. Reality itself began to bend around the ships as they prepared to compress space-time to its absolute limit. On Kepler Prime, Katie's heart rhythm became dangerously irregular. The Inquisitor increased the intensity again, frustrated by her continued consciousness. It wanted her to break, to confess, to validate its superiority. Katie's vision was going dark at the edges. She couldn't feel her hands anymore. The pain had transcended into something beyond sensation, becoming her entire reality. Then, suddenly her heart stopped beating. The Inquisitor stepped back, those strange eyes showing something that might have been disappointment. Weak, it said softly. I expected more from the species that claims to be predators. 29 minutes and 17 seconds after Katie's distress beacon first activated, the fabric of space 30 meters from Kepler Prime Station tore open like someone had ripped a hole in reality itself. The first alarm started as a low wail that quickly built into a deafening shriek. Then another joined it, and another, until the entire station was filled with the sound of panic. In the control center of Kepler Prime, the defense coordinator stared at his displays like he was seeing a ghost. He was from a species that had been navigating space for over 5,000 years, and what he was seeing simply couldn't be real. His primary hands gripped the console while his secondary hands frantically ran calculations, hoping the sensors were malfunctioning. They weren't. Impossible, he whispered, then louder, this is impossible. The lead counselor, who had been in his private chambers reviewing Katie Brooks's interrogation data with satisfaction, rushed into the control center. What is happening? Why are the alarms? 15 human warships just appeared inside our defensive perimeter, the coordinator said, his voice climbing toward hysteria. They came from 30 light-years away. In under half an hour. That's not possible. No species in the known galaxy has that capability. The physics alone would require. Where are they? The counselor demanded, his scales beginning to ripple in a pattern that his species displayed when experiencing fear. The coordinator brought up the visual display. 15 warships hung in space, arranged in a formation that looked almost predatory. They weren't the largest ships the council had seen. In fact, by galactic standards they were relatively small. But something about them was different. They looked functional, brutal even. No decorative elements, no displays of cultural pride. Just weapons and armor and the cold efficiency of machines built for one purpose. Hail them, the counselor ordered, trying to regain his composure. Remind them of their place. Before the coordinator could respond, every communication channel on the station crackled to life simultaneously. A human voice, speaking in clear galactic standard, filled every speaker. Admiral Tom Hayes of the United Nations Space Command, requesting immediate communication with the Galactic Council. This is not optional. The counselor's scales flattened against his body, an instinctive response to a threat. He moved to the main view screen and activated it with a sharp gesture. A human male appeared on the screen. The counselor had seen humans before and had dismissed them as soft, weak creatures with fragile bodies. But this one was different. His face looked like it had been carved from granite. His eyes were a cold blue that reminded the counselor of ice on a dead world. And those eyes were burning with something that made the counselor's ancient instincts scream danger. This is Admiral Hayes, the human said, his voice perfectly controlled. You are holding. He paused, and the counselor saw something flicker across that stone face. Pain, perhaps. Or rage so deep it had gone beyond expression. You were holding diplomatic intern Katie Brooks. Our sensors indicate her life signs terminated 8 minutes ago. The counselor felt a chill run down his spine. 8 minutes ago. Almost exactly when the Inquisitor had reported the human's death. How did they know? How did they get here so fast? You have 30 seconds to power down all weapons and prepare to surrender, Hayes continued. This is your only warning. The counselor's fear transformed into indignation. How dare this primitive species threaten the council? They'd been ruling this sector of space for millennia before humans even discovered fire. His scales flared outward in a display of dominance. You dare threaten the Galactic Council? The counselor roared. You are outmatched, outnumbered, and outclassed in every way. We have 30 ships to your 15. Our technology has been refined over thousands of years while your species was still living in caves and hitting each other with rocks. 20 seconds, Hayes said, his expression not changing at all. The counselor gestured sharply, bringing up tactical displays. Look at our fleet. Our shields can withstand the energy of a star. Our weapons have ended civilizations. You jumped here in desperation, a suicide mission to save one insignificant girl, and now you will pay for your arrogance. 10 seconds, Hayes said quietly. The counselor's mind raced. He thought about the human girl, about how she'd refused to break even under maximum pain. He thought about how these ships had crossed 30 light-years in minutes, something that should be impossible. He thought about the warning in those cold blue eyes. Then his pride overrode his instincts. Defense Coordinator, the counselor said, turning away from the screen. Show these primitives what it means to challenge the council. Destroy them. The coordinator hesitated for just a moment, his hands hovering over the controls. Something in his survival instincts was screaming at him that this was wrong, that they were making a terrible mistake. Now, the counselor roared. The coordinator activated the weapons systems. The council fleet, 30 ships strong, each one a masterpiece of military engineering refined over millennia, powered up their weapons. Energy signatures lit up the darkness of space as plasma cannons charged, particle beams aligned, and missile bays opened. The council fleet opened fire, sending enough destructive power to level a continent screaming toward the human ships. On the bridge of the flagship Righteous Fury, Admiral Hayes watched the incoming weapons fire on his display. He didn't flinch. He didn't show any emotion at all. He simply turned to his tactical officer and said 2 words that would echo through galactic history. Show them. What happened next would be taught in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. Not as a battle. Not as a conflict between equal forces. But as a lesson about what happens when you make humanity angry. It was the last mistake the Council would ever make. The human warships moved like nothing the Council had ever seen before. They didn't operate as individual vessels seeking glory or honor. They moved as one living thing, a pack of wolves that had found their prey and were closing in for the kill. The Council's plasma cannons fired first, sending bright blue streams of superheated energy toward the human fleet. The weapons had ended wars, destroyed fleets, brought entire civilizations to their knees. They were the pride of Council military engineering. They splashed harmlessly against the human ship's armor like water against stone. The Council Defense Coordinator stared at his screens in disbelief. Impossible. Those energy readings should have melted through their hulls. What are their ships made of? He would never get his answer. The human fleet responded, and hell itself seemed to open up in the void of space. Railguns fired tungsten rods the size of telephone poles at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles were simple metal, no fancy energy fields or exotic particles. Just mass and velocity and the basic physics that humanity had understood for centuries. They punched through the Council ship's shields like they weren't even there, tearing through the hulls and out the other side, leaving perfectly circular holes that vented atmosphere and crew into space. Nuclear-pumped lasers fired next, each beam carrying the energy of a small sun compressed into a line narrower than a human hair. Where they touched Council ships, metal didn't just melt. It vaporized instantly, turning solid matter into expanding clouds of superheated gas. Then came the missiles. Hundreds of them, launched from pods that rippled like machine gun fire. Each warhead corkscrewed through space on its own trajectory, their guidance systems so precise they could track a pebble in a meteor storm. The Council ships tried to shoot them down, but for every missile they destroyed, 3 more got through. The Council fleet fought back, but they fought like duelists. Each ship operated independently, their captains seeking personal glory, trying to prove their worth through individual acts of courage. They'd been trained in a tradition of honorable combat that stretched back thousands of years. The human fleet fought like a machine that had been built for one single purpose: the complete and total destruction of the enemy. Every ship knew exactly where every other ship was. Their fire was coordinated down to the microsecond. They didn't seek glory. They didn't care about honor. They just wanted the Council to stop existing. 5 minutes into what the Council had expected to be a glorious battle, half their fleet was debris spinning through space. Beautiful ships that had taken decades to build were now clouds of scrap metal and frozen bodies. 10 minutes in, the surviving Council ships tried to run. No. Admiral Hayes's voice came across the fleet channel, cold as ice in deep space. Helm, intercept pattern Delta. No one leaves until we have answers. The Righteous Fury, the largest of the human ships, moved to block the escape route. It positioned itself between the fleeing Council vessels and open space like a sheepdog herding prey. The other human ships formed a net, corralling the survivors, disabling their engines with precise shots that left the crew alive but the ships dead in the water. One by one, the Council vessels were captured. Their crews surrendered, and for the first time in their long history, they felt something they'd never experienced before: the terror of being prey instead of predators. While the space battle ended, Marines were already breaching Kepler Prime Station itself. They came through 3 separate airlocks simultaneously, moving with practiced efficiency that spoke of hundreds of training drills and real combat experience. The station's security forces were waiting. They opened fire with plasma rifles, weapons designed to wound and disable rather than kill. The Council prided itself on humane security measures. The weapons' fire splashed against the Marines' powered armor and did absolutely nothing. The security forces froze, staring at what they were facing. Humans in powered armor stood over 7 feet tall, moving with a grace that shouldn't be possible for something that massive. They looked like walking tanks, but they moved like the ancient predators from Earth's savage past. The security forces broke and ran. They weren't cowards, but they also weren't stupid. You didn't fight something that shrugged off your best weapons and kept coming. The Marines didn't chase them. They had one objective, and they moved through the station with purpose, their helmet displays showing them exactly where to go. Colonel Ryan Martinez led the team that found the compliance chamber on the lower decks. His armor sensors picked up the biometric signature immediately, and his heart sank when he saw the status: deceased, 19 minutes. "Admiral," he said quietly into his comm, "we've located her." There was a pause on the other end, just a heartbeat of silence. Then Hayes's voice came back, quieter than Martinez had ever heard it. "Secure the area. I'm coming down." Admiral Hayes arrived 10 minutes later, removing his helmet as he entered the chamber. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just looking at the young woman strapped to the interrogation chair. Katie Brooks looked peaceful now, her eyes closed, her face relaxed. You couldn't tell from looking at her what she'd endured in her final minutes. She looked like she might just be sleeping. Hayes felt something crack in his chest. He'd known this was coming. He'd watched her vitals flatline while they were still jumping through space. But seeing her in person, seeing how young she was, how small she looked in that terrible chair, made it real in a way that numbers on a screen never could. The Inquisitor was dragged in by 2 Marines, still struggling despite the electromagnetic restraints. When it saw Hayes, it tried to draw itself up with dignity. "You cannot do this," it hissed, its multiple arms gesturing frantically. "We are the Council. We have diplomatic immunity under galactic law. This is an act of war." Hayes turned slowly, and the Inquisitor stopped struggling when it saw his eyes. "Diplomatic immunity," Hayes said slowly, "covers diplomats. Not torturers. Not murderers." He took a step closer. Katie Brooks was 19 years old. She believed in peace, in building bridges between species. And you tortured her to death because your pride couldn't handle being questioned by someone you saw as inferior. "It was necessary for," the Inquisitor began. "I don't care," Hayes interrupted. His voice was still quiet, still controlled, but there was something underneath it that made even the Marines standing guard take a step back. "Record everything," he said into his comm, "every room in this station, every piece of evidence, every communication log. The galaxy needs to see exactly what happened here." He looked at Katie one more time, then back at the Inquisitor. "Get this thing out of my sight. And someone get me a medical team. Katie Brooks is going home." 6 weeks after the battle at Kepler Prime, every screen in every inhabited system across the galaxy showed the same thing. A courtroom on Earth where the most important trial in galactic history was about to begin. The courtroom was massive, built specifically for this occasion. Representatives from 47 different species sat in the viewing galleries, some in atmospheric suits, others in specialized tanks or environmental chambers. Human reporters lined one wall, their cameras recording every moment. This wasn't just a trial. It was a message to the entire galaxy about what humanity would and would not tolerate. Judge Patricia Chin, appointed by the newly formed Allied Systems Court, took her seat at the bench. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, with gray hair and kind eyes that could turn hard as steel when necessary. Today those eyes were very hard indeed. The evidence was presented with cold, methodical precision. First came Katie's distress call, her young voice trying to remain calm as she explained the situation. Then came the biometric data, displayed on massive screens for everyone to see. The graphs showed 29 minutes of systematic torture, each spike in the pain receptors representing agony that most species couldn't even comprehend. The numbers told a story of suffering that made several of the alien observers leave the courtroom. Then came the communications between council members. Audio recordings of them discussing Katie's interrogation, calling it necessary discipline for an inferior species. Video of the lead counselor laughing as he allowed her distress beacon to transmit, confident that no help could possibly arrive in time. The Inquisitor and 12 council members sat in restraints at the defense table, forced to watch as their crimes were laid bare for the galaxy to see. Some tried to maintain their dignity. Others stared at the floor, unable to meet the eyes of the countless beings watching them. The trial lasted 3 days. The defense argued that they had been following standard council procedures, that they had no way of knowing humans were so fragile, that this was all a terrible misunderstanding between cultures. The prosecution simply played Katie's biometric data again and asked if causing 29 minutes of maximum pain to a teenager who had committed no crime seemed like a misunderstanding. The jury, composed of representatives from 12 different species including 3 humans, deliberated for less than an hour. Judge Chin read the verdict in a voice completely empty of emotion. On all counts of crimes against sapient life, torture and murder of a diplomatic envoy under protected status, this court finds the defendants guilty. The sentences came down like hammer blows. Life imprisonment in isolation. No parole. No appeals. No contact with the outside world. They would live out their remaining years in cells built to their species' requirements, alone with their thoughts and their crimes. But the trial itself was just the beginning of the changes sweeping through the galaxy. Species that had lived under the Council's rule for centuries suddenly found themselves learning things about humanity that the Council had never bothered to investigate. Research teams descended on Earth's databases, and what they found both fascinated and terrified them. They learned that Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. The gravity was 30% higher than galactic standard, strong enough to crush most species within hours. 70% of the surface was covered in salt water so corrosive it would burn through most alien tissues. The atmosphere had enough oxygen to be mildly toxic to half the species in the galaxy. Earth wasn't just humanity's home. It was a forge that had hammered them into something incredibly resilient. They learned about human history, about wars that had killed millions, about weapons designed to end all life on the planet. They learned about concepts like rules of engagement, and war crimes, and proportional response, ideas that most species had never needed because they'd never taken violence as far as humans had. They learned about human philosophy, about debates that had raged for thousands of years about when violence was justified, about the difference between justice and revenge, about the responsibility that came with power. Most terrifying of all, they learned about human loyalty, about the instinct that made humans risk everything for a single member of their species. They learned about rescue missions through enemy territory, about soldiers who threw themselves on grenades to save their friends, about parents who would fight impossible odds to save their children. Admiral Hayes stood at the memorial ceremony on what had been Kepler Prime Station, now renamed Brooks Station in Katie's honor. A statue dominated the central plaza, showing Katie as she'd been in life, young and determined, her hand raised as if making a point in the middle of an argument. She looked forever young, forever defiant, forever brave. Thousands had gathered for the ceremony, humans and aliens standing side by side. Hayes stepped up to the podium and the crowd fell silent. "We didn't cross 30 light years in half an hour because we're warlike," Hayes said, his voice carrying through the plaza. "We did it because Katie Brooks was ours. She was 19 years old. She just started her career. She believed in diplomacy, in peace, in building bridges between species who didn't understand each other." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces, both human and alien. "She believed in talking instead of fighting, in finding common ground and making the galaxy a better place. And when you took her from us, when you tortured her for the crime of defending her species' honor, you learned something about humanity that we'd hoped you would never have to learn. His voice grew harder. We are not your enemies. We don't seek war. We don't want to conquer or dominate. But when you hurt one of ours, when you cross that line, we will move heaven and earth to make it right. We will bend the laws of physics if we have to. We will risk everything. Because that's what it means to be human. The statue's base bore a simple inscription that thousands of beings would read in the years to come. Katie Brooks, Diplomatic Intern, United Nations. She spoke for peace. We answered for justice. Below that, carved into the metal in 47 different languages, was a new covenant that would reshape galactic law forever. No sapient being shall be tortured, enslaved, or killed for political convenience. No species shall be dismissed as inferior. No voice shall be silenced through violence. These rights are universal, and humanity will ensure they remain so. The Galactic Council was gone, dissolved by unanimous vote of its own member species. In its place stood the Allied Systems Coalition, a new government built on principles of equality and mutual respect. Humanity sat at its core not as conquerors but as guardians. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity didn't need to be the strongest species or the fastest or the most technologically advanced. They just needed to be human. And that was more than enough.